The White House's top trade officials are meeting with their Chinese counterparts in Switzerland tomorrow, and the two sides have been mired in a trade war. They're seeking a path to de-escalate those tensions. Today, President Trump offered something of an olive branch by sharing that he supports a much lower tariff, a still relatively high 80% on Chinese goods. Still, that's nearly half the 145% that he first put into place. CNN's Kristen Holmes is live for us at the White House. So, Kristen, what are officials saying on the eve of these important conversations?
Yeah, Boris, and just to note there, 80%, even though that is lower than 145%, that's still astronomical. And when you talk to economists, they say anything above 50% is likely to freeze the market. So whether or not this would actually work, but anyway, we'll go back to what Donald Trump and his officials are saying right now. They're talking about what this meeting is going to look like. I have talked to a number of administration officials who say that they should be tempering down expectations, that they don't want it to be the idea that they're going to come out of this with some kind of major trade deal. In fact, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent actually said that he thought this was more about de-escalation, getting everyone to the table, than actually making a deal. Now, when Caroline Leavitt was asked about what Donald Trump posted online about those 80% tariffs, here's what she said.
The president still remains with his position that he is not going to unilaterally bring down tariffs on China. We need to see concessions from them as well. And again, that's part of the reason that Secretary Bessent is going to talk to his Chinese counterparts this weekend to start those discussions in person. As for the 80% number, that was a number the president threw out there, and we'll see what happens this weekend.
So one thing I want to point out is when he threw this number out there, at the end of it, he said 80% tariff on China seems right up to Scott B. Well, they are hanging quite a bit on Bessent, because we heard Caroline Leavitt talking about how Trump had confidence in Bessent, how he knew that Bessent was going to do a good job. There's obviously going to be some kind of disappointment if we don't see some kind of working towards a deal after this meeting. So a lot of pressure there on Bessent as we've seen this escalation that really, at this point, has come to a standstill.
Kristen Holmes, live for us at the White House. Thank you so much, Kristen. Let's bring in CNN's Matt Egan now. So, Matt, talk to us about the current impacts that these tariffs are having on trade between China and the United States.
Yeah, Boris, look, there is so much riding on these meetings in Geneva, because you still have a situation where the world's two biggest economies are in a full-blown trade war. These are sky-high tariffs, and the clock is ticking, right? The longer this goes on, the more damage to the economy, and yeah, the more damage to world trade. We just learned today from China that their exports into the United States plunged by 21% in April, and we've seen that shipments from China into the port of Los Angeles have plunged. Analysts warn that we could be days or weeks away from a COVID-style supply chain meltdown that potentially causes shortages. Of course, this meltdown would be largely self-inflicted. And so that is why, obviously, any sort of de-escalation that comes out of this meeting would be welcome. 145% tariffs on China, that's just not sustainable. I would just note, though, that 80% tariffs, I mean, that is not exactly low. That is still very high, higher than pretty much anyone had been anticipating coming into this year. And even if shortages are avoided here, there's growing concern about sticker shock. Goldman Sachs has this new warning out where they say that a key inflation metric in the United States could hit nearly 4% by Christmas, and they're anticipating even bigger price increases for a number of categories, including clothes, footwear, used cars, appliances, and computers. Boris, they're warning that essentially this trade war could end up undoing a lot of the progress in the war on inflation.
Yeah, notable that you mentioned Christmas there, because even as President Trump talks about potentially lowering tariffs on China, he's also brought up raising tariffs on major toy makers, one in specific, right?
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about Mattel. That's the company behind toys including Barbie, Fisher-Price, and those Hot Wheel monster trucks that my kids love. Now, Mattel warned recently that because of tariffs, they're going to have to increase U.S. prices. And the CEO of Mattel also said that he doubts that even with these tariffs, we're going to have a situation where toy manufacturing comes back to the United States. Now, the president had a chance to respond to that in the Oval Office yesterday. Take a listen to what he said.
Let him go, and we'll put 100% tariff on his toys, and he won't sell one toy in the United States, and that's their biggest market. I heard that. I mean, I watched this guy talking about how I'm going to go counter. I said, well, I wouldn't want to have him as an executive too long.
So there you heard the president going directly after Mattel and its CEO. I would just note, though, that 100% tariffs, that would obviously dramatically increase the price that Americans are paying when they're trying to buy Barbies or Hot Wheels or other toys, if they could even get it. But it is notable to hear the president just a few days after Mattel came out with this price hike announcement, going right back after the company. Boris?
Yeah, interesting. Matt Egan, thanks so much for the reporting. Brianna?
The impact from this trade war has been significant, especially at the busiest port in the U.S., which is the Port of Los Angeles. Gene Soroka is with us now. He's the executive director at the Port of Los Angeles. Gene, great to have you back here. We had heard on Wednesday night from the Port of Seattle commissioner that they had no container ships in port. That was the first time they'd seen that since the height of the pandemic. Last time you and I spoke here recently, you were expecting a 35% drop in port traffic this week. What are you seeing?
Good afternoon, Brianna. Yes, we saw that drop this week. And when we close the books tomorrow night, we'll be down about 31% in volume compared to the same time last year. We've welcomed 16 ships into the Port of Los Angeles this week. 4 vessels were canceled. In the end, we've got another 13 vessels that have been canceled for the balance of May, making up a little more than 20% overall of what we expected. So we have now seen the impact right here on the docks.
So you're seeing a real diminished volume coming in there. This morning, the president said the tariffs on China could be 80%, that they could go down. Now, I will say there are questions as to whether that is an overture rather than an actual number that he wants to see as an end goal. The White House is saying this isn't a unilateral thing. This would be part of, obviously, some talks that they're having. But when you look at that number, it's still really big, 80%. Would that help, or is that just still too big to really make a difference?
I think it's too big to make any difference. And I haven't heard from any merchandisers or procurement folks that said a number like that would get them to start up buying again from China.
Oh, that's a really important thing to note. At what point do longshoremen, dock workers, mechanics, truck drivers start seeing layoffs in your experience?
Yeah, we're starting to see that right now. There are 33 work groups out on the docks today. We call them labor gangs. 33. And there's about 25 members to each one of those labor gangs. In the past several recent Friday numbers, we've been between 40 and 50 labor gangs out on the docks. With 8 ships in port today, we're starting to see the dock workers go back to the hiring hall.
Okay, so explain what that means. Are they sort of furloughed? Are their hours reduced? How does it work? How does that affect their take-home pay?
It gets cut. And what you'll see are the folks go back to the hiring hall looking for other jobs of similar timing and interest. My hope, and I've talked to the Employers Association about this, is to get these dock workers who are not moving cargo back onto the terminals so they can do preventative maintenance or upkeep on the equipment, get the yards in good shape for whenever that cargo comes back. It's rarely an occasion with a dip in volume that you can go out and do all that maintenance work. So that's what we'd like to see happen right now.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt that's needed, and it's tough to find time to do that when things are buzzing. When do shoppers, right? When do consumers go into the store, start feeling the effects of what you are seeing in port?
I think it's going to be pretty quick, Brianna. This week were the first arrivals by container ship where the tariffs from China were applied at these very high 145% levels, making a product from China now 2.5 times more expensive than it was just last month. Those cost increases are going to be passed on to us as consumers. And if you're importing parts and components for American factories, they will see those costs pass on as well.
Gene, if you could speak directly to the president, what would you say to him?
there are real impacts on the ground. Now, with these policies and the change in direction, we may see more American manufacturing. I'd like to focus on more American exports, whether it's agriculture, where we only consume as American citizens about a third of what the American farmer grows. And let's try to open up our markets overseas to American manufacturers. LA County is the largest employee base of manufacturing jobs in the country at 390,000 folks. Yet they export only 1% of the goods they make. Let's focus on these two areas to begin and see what we can do to open up markets overseas as part of these negotiations.
Gene Soroka, great to speak with you and see what you're seeing there in the Port of LA. We appreciate your time today.